The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cracked asphalt of Miller Street, transforming the weathered brick exterior of the Crossroads bar into a canvas of amber and rust. The neon sign above the entrance flickered to life. As daylight faded its blue-red glow, a lighthouse for the weary souls of Riverdale's industrial district. Marcus Reed stood motionless in the doorway, his broad shoulders nearly filling the frame. 6'3" of solid muscle wrapped in a plain black t-shirt and dark jeans. His face, a portrait of stoic indifference, revealed nothing as his eyes methodically scanned the parking lot. At 32, the creases at the corners of his eyes told stories his lips never would. The weight of the metal door handle felt familiar in his palm as he pulled it open. The scent of beer-polished wood and faint cigarette smoke welcomed him like an old friend. 6 months had passed since Tony Marino hired him as security, and still Marcus entered each night as if evaluating a new terrain. "Evening, Marcus," Tony called from behind the bar, his Italian accent still strong, despite 4 decades in America. At 58, Tony's hair had gone completely silver, but his movements remained spry as he arranged glasses on the shelf. "You're early today." Marcus nodded his only acknowledgement. Words were currency he spent sparingly. The Crossroads was quiet this Thursday evening. A few regulars hunched over their drinks at the bar. 2 men locked in silent combat over a game of pool. The jukebox murmured an old Johnny Cash tune, The Man in Black singing about hurt, in a way that resonated with something deep inside Marcus. His routine never varied. First, he walked the perimeter checking exits, sight lines, potential choke points, military habits embedded too deeply to break. Next, he positioned himself by the bar, back to the wall, eyes on the entrance. From there, he could monitor the entire room while appearing to do nothing at all. "You know, most bouncers talk to people," Tony remarked, sliding a glass of water toward Marcus. "Been here half a year and you're still a mystery, my friend." Marcus's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "Nothing interesting to tell." Tony laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "See, I don't believe that. Those eyes of yours, they've seen things. But don't worry, your secrets are safe here." If Tony only knew. The things those eyes had seen would keep the old man awake at night. Afghanistan, Iraq, places without names on any civilian map. 8 years with the Special Activities Division, America's Ghost Warriors. Operations that officially never happened, carried out by men who officially didn't exist. Marcus absently touched the scar beneath his collar, a 3-inch reminder of Sarajevo. Of the night he'd lost everything. The front door swung open, bringing in a gust of cool evening air and the sound of laughter. Marcus's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, muscles tensing then relaxing as he recognized the newcomer. Lily Reed entered the Crossroads like a burst of sunshine in a storm cloud. 22 years old, with their mother's chestnut hair and their father's determined chin. Her smile could disarm a room, a quality Marcus had always envied in his younger sister. "There she is," Tony exclaimed, arms wide. "My favorite psychology student. How was class today?" Lily dropped her backpack by the bar, her camera still hanging from her neck. "Fascinating. We started a new unit on trauma response and resilience." She glanced at Marcus with a teasing smile. "I could use you as my case study big brother, the man who never flinches." The corner of Marcus's mouth lifted slightly. "I flinch, just not where you can see it." Their relationship was built on such moments, her light probing his darkness, him allowing just enough to keep her close without revealing the shadows. After their parents' death 7 years ago, Marcus had become her guardian from afar, sending money from wherever he was deployed. Now finally home for good, He struggled to bridge the gap created by years of absence and secrets. Lily knew he'd been military. Special forces, she assumed. But she didn't know about the wet work, the operations that left blood on his hands and ghosts in his dreams. And he intended to keep it that way. "Any interesting photos today?" Tony asked, nodding toward her camera. Lily's expression shifted, a brief cloud passing over her features. "Actually, yes, but not the good kind." She pulled up a photo on her camera's display screen. "I was practicing street photography near Peterson Street when I saw these guys threatening Mr. Abrams at his hardware store." Marcus moved closer, something cold settling in his stomach as he viewed the image. 3 men in leather jackets surrounding the elderly store owner. One had his finger jabbed into the old man's chest. The insignia on their jackets was unmistakable, a coiled viper fangs bared. "You know them?" Lily asked, noticing his reaction. "No," Marcus said, perhaps too quickly. "But I've heard about them. The Vipers. They've been moving into Riverdale the last few months." Tony snorted. "Thugs working for that real estate company, Blackwater Development. They want to build some fancy condos where our businesses stand. Been putting pressure on everyone in the neighborhood to sell." Marcus studied the image more carefully. The man in the center caught his attention, close-cropped hair, military, bearing the stance of someone trained in intimidation. "Did they see you taking this?" Lily shrugged. "I don't think so. I was across the street with a zoom lens." "Delete it," Marcus said flatly. "What I? These aren't college kids playing tough. They're dangerous." His tone left no room for argument. "Delete it and stay away from them." The tension was broken by Tony placing 3 shot glasses on the bar. "Enough serious talk. Tonight we celebrate the Crossroads turns 30 years old this month." Lily's eyes widened. "Tony, you should have said something. We could have planned a party." The old man waved dismissively. "This is all the party I need. My favorite people, my bar still standing after all these years." He raised his glass. "To surviving." Marcus lifted his glass mechanically, his mind still processing the photograph. The Vipers were small-time muscle, but their presence in Riverdale was concerning. Every territory expansion brought violence. Every shift in criminal enterprise created casualties. The front door opened again, admitting Sheriff Mike Collins. His weathered face broke into a smile when he spotted Tony. "Right on time," Tony called. "Come join the anniversary toast." Collins removed his hat, nodding politely to Lily. His eyes lingered on Marcus with the instinctive suspicion one predator reserves for another. "Just a quick one. I'm still on duty." "Mike and I go back to high school," Tony explained to Marcus and Lily. "He used to be my best customer until they made him sheriff. Now I just look the other way when you serve after hours," Collins joked, accepting the shot glass. The 4 clinked glasses, and Marcus downed his whiskey, welcoming the burn. As Tony and Collins fell into conversation about the old days, Lily leaned closer to her brother. "You're extra tense tonight," she whispered. "Is it the photograph? Or something else?" Marcus's eyes flicked toward the window. "Just a feeling. Your feelings usually mean something." He couldn't explain that his instincts had been honed through years of staying alive in hostile territory, that the prickling on the back of his neck had saved his life more times than he could count. "Probably nothing," he said. "How's your thesis coming along?" She allowed the subject change. "Slowly. I'm exploring how community spaces like this bar serve as informal support systems for people dealing with isolation." Marcus nodded toward Tony. "He'd be a good interview subject." "Already scheduled for next week," Lily smiled. "You know you could talk to me sometime for the thesis." "Not much to say." "There's plenty," she countered. Like why a decorated Special Forces veteran chooses to work as a bouncer in a neighborhood bar instead of joining one of those private security firms that pay six figures. Marcus's expression remained neutral, but internally he flinched. She had always been too perceptive, too determined to understand him. Simple jobs have simple problems. And fewer ghosts. Her voice was gentle, probing. Before he could respond, his attention snapped to the front window. A black SUV had pulled into the parking lot, followed by two motorcycles. The vehicle's tinted windows reflected the neon glow of the crossroads sign. "Tony," Marcus called, interrupting the bartender's conversation. "Expecting any large groups tonight?" Tony glanced toward the window. "No, Thursday's usually quiet." His expression darkened as he recognized the vehicles. "Trouble." Sheriff Collins followed their gaze. "I'd better step outside." "No," Marcus said firmly. "Stay inside. If they're who I think they are, a uniform might escalate things." Collins frowned. "I'm not hiding from thugs in my own town." "Not hiding," Marcus clarified. "Strategic positioning. Inside, you can call for backup if needed. Outside, you're an isolated target." The sheriff studied Marcus with new interest. "Military." "Something like that." The door swung open and 5 men entered. Their leader, a tall man with a shaved head and a snake tattoo curling up his neck, surveyed the room with cold calculation. The viper on his leather jacket matched the one in Lily's photograph. Marcus positioned himself between the newcomers and the bar where Lily sat. His stance was casual, but his weight had shifted to the balls of his feet, ready to move in any direction. "Evening, gentlemen," Tony called, his friendly tone strained. "What can I get you?" The leader approached the bar deliberately, brushing past Marcus. "Derek Matheson," he announced, as if the name should mean something. "I represent Blackwater Development." "Not interested in selling," Tony replied immediately. "As I told your boss last month." Derek smiled, revealing a gold tooth. "Mr. Kane thinks you should reconsider. Property values in Riverdale are volatile these days. Accidents happen. Fires start." He glanced around the bar. "Old buildings like this, electrical problems are common." Sheriff Collins stepped forward, hand resting casually near his holstered weapon. "Sounds like a threat, Mr. Matheson." Derek's smile didn't waver. "Just friendly business advice, Sheriff." His eyes found Lily, recognition flashing across his features. "Well, what do we have here?" Marcus tensed but maintained his position. "You're the girl with the camera," Derek continued, moving closer to Lily. "Caught you taking pictures on Peterson Street yesterday." Lily paled slightly but held her ground. "I was practicing photography for my class. Public street, public sidewalk." "Funny coincidence you showing up here." Derek leaned against the bar, but too close to Lily for Marcus's comfort. "Almost like you were following us." "She's a regular," Tony interjected. "My friend's daughter." Derek's eyes narrowed. "Your friend's nosy daughter should be careful where she points that camera. Some people value their privacy." Marcus moved then, a subtle shift that placed him directly in Derek's line of sight. "The lady's not interested in a conversation." Derek turned, seeming to truly notice Marcus for the first time. He sized him up with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to physical confrontation. "And who might you be?" "Security," Marcus replied flatly. Derek laughed, a harsh sound that drew chuckles from his companions. "Security for this dump?" He turned to Tony. "You hiring muscle now, old man, won't help." Sheriff Collins stepped forward. "I think you gentlemen have made your point. Time to leave." Derek held up his hands in mock surrender. "Just having a friendly drink, Sheriff." He turned back to Tony. "We'll be seeing you again, soon." His eyes flicked to Lily. "All of you." As they turned to leave, Derek deliberately bumped into Marcus, testing his reaction. Marcus remained immobile, only his eyes tracking the man's movement. Years of discipline kept his hands from curling into fists, from reaching for the tactical knife concealed at his ankle, a habit from his previous life he couldn't break. The door slammed behind the Vipers, leaving an uneasy silence in their wake. "Those are the men from the photograph," Lily said quietly. Tony cursed under his breath. "They've been making rounds, pressuring business owners. Last week, Joe's Diner had a kitchen fire. Insurance called it electrical, but everyone knows better." Sheriff Collins frowned. "I can increase patrols in the area, but without evidence of wrongdoing, my hands are tied." "It won't help," Marcus said, his voice distant. "They'll wait until you're not around." Tony looked at him curiously. "You seem to know their type." Marcus said nothing, but his mind was already cataloging threats, calculating response scenarios, mapping defensive positions, professional habits that had kept him alive through 2 wars and countless black operations. "I should close early tonight," Tony decided. "Lily, Marcus will walk you home." "I can stay," Collins offered. Marcus shook his head. "Better if you're visible elsewhere. Make them think you're not concerned about this place specifically." The sheriff nodded reluctantly. "I'll check in tomorrow." He placed a hand on Tony's shoulder. "Be careful, old friend." After Collins left, Tony began ushering the few remaining customers out, explaining about an unexpected plumbing issue. Marcus watched the parking lot through the window, confirming the Vipers had truly departed. "They'll be back," he said quietly to Tony, once they were alone. The old man nodded grimly. "I know, but I won't sell. This place was my wife's dream. I promised her before she passed that I'd keep it going." Marcus understood such promises. They were the foundations upon which men like them built their lives. "I'm calling an Uber," Lily announced, phone in hand. "You don't need to walk me, Marcus." "Yes, I do." His tone brooked no argument. 20 minutes later, they stood outside Lily's apartment building 6 blocks from the crossroads. The street was quiet, windows glowing warmly in the darkness. "You're worried," Lily observed, keys in hand. Marcus scanned the street one final time. "The man who recognized you, Derek. He's dangerous." "How can you tell?" "Experience." He looked down at her, his expression softening slightly. "Stay away from the crossroads for a few days." She frowned. "But my interviews for my thesis can wait?" His voice was firm. "Promise me, Lily." She studied his face, seeing something there that made her nod. "All right, for a few days." Marcus waited until she was safely inside before turning away. Instead of heading to his own apartment, he circled the block, checking for any signs of surveillance. Finding none, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in nearly 2 years. It rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. "Didn't expect to hear from you again, Ghost." Marcus's former call sign felt strange after so long. "Need information, Jackson. The Vipers. Criminal organization operating in Riverdale. Connected to Blackwater Development." A low whistle came through the speaker. "Straight to business as always. No, how are you, Jackson? How's civilian life treating you?" "How are you, Jackson?" Marcus asked mechanically. "Bored as hell working private security for rich assholes, but it pays the bills." A pause. "Why the interest in the Vipers? They're targeting my employer, and they've noticed my sister." Jackson's tone immediately changed. "I'll see what I can find. Give me 24 hours. Appreciated." "Marcus," Jackson said before he could hang up, "the unit still talks about Sarajevo, about what happened to the team." Marcus ended the call without responding. Some wounds never healed enough to discuss. His apartment was on the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse sparsely furnished with only the essentials. No photographs adorned the walls. No mementos revealed his past. The only personal touch was a worn copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations on the nightstand, a gift from his father before his first deployment. Marcus moved to the closet, pushing aside hanging clothes to reveal a small electronic keypad embedded in the wall. He entered a 12-digit code, and a section of the floor slid open, revealing a metal case. Inside lay the tools of his former trade: a custom Glock 19 with suppressor, 3 spare magazines, a military-grade combat knife, tactical gear, communications equipment, and various other implements designed for infiltration and combat. He hadn't touched them since Sarajevo, since carrying his dying teammates through the snow, their blood freezing on his hands. Marcus stared at the weapon's memories flooding back. The weight of a rifle against his shoulder, the metallic taste of adrenaline before an operation, the cold efficiency that had made him a legend within the unit. They had called him Ghost because he could infiltrate any perimeter, eliminate any target, and disappear without a trace. Because something inside him had already died long before he joined the military. He closed the case without removing anything. Not yet. But for the first time in 2 years, he felt the familiar clarity of purpose returning. Someone had threatened his sister, threatened the fragile peace he'd built. The ghost might be necessary again. Morning found Marcus at the crossroads before opening hours. Tony had given him a key months ago, trusting him implicitly, despite knowing so little about him. That trust weighed on Marcus as he methodically installed small surveillance cameras at strategic points around the bar. The equipment had come from a storage unit across town, another relic of his previous life. The cameras were military-grade, virtually undetectable, and would feed directly to his phone. Expecting more trouble, Marcus turned to find Tony watching him from the doorway to the back office. "Yes," he answered honestly. Tony nodded, unsurprised. "You're not just some ex-military guy looking for quiet work, are you?" Marcus finished mounting the last camera before responding. "Does it matter? It might, depending on what comes through that door next time Derek and his friends visit." The implication was clear. Tony wanted to know if his bouncer was capable of more than ejecting rowdy drunks. "I can handle them," Marcus said simply. Tony studied him for a long moment. "I believe you, but I need to know, will handling them bring heat down on this place?" On Lily. The question struck at the heart of Marcus's dilemma. His training, his instincts all pushed toward elimination of threats, permanent solutions. But such actions had consequences, ripple effects, that could endanger the very people he sought to protect. "No," he finally answered. "I'll be careful." Tony seemed satisfied. "Good, because that girl loves you even if she doesn't understand you. And I've grown rather fond of having you around myself." The old man's unexpected warmth caught Marcus off guard. He nodded awkwardly, unused to such sentiments. "The Vipers will return," he said, changing the subject. "Probably tonight, with more men." Tony's expression hardened. "I won't sell. Not to them, not to anyone." "I know," Marcus hesitated. "But maybe Lily should stay away for a while." "Already handled. Told her I'm postponing her interviews because of some private family matter." Tony smiled slightly. "She wasn't happy, but she accepted it." Marcus felt a surge of gratitude. Tony was protecting Lily without being asked, understanding instinctively what Marcus couldn't articulate. His phone vibrated, Jackson calling. "Excuse me?" he said to Tony, stepping outside to take the call. "Got your information," Jackson said without preamble. "The Vipers are Victor Kane's personal enforcement crew. Kane's ex-military dishonorable discharge about 8 years ago. Now he's Blackwater Development's Director of Acquisitions." Basically, he identifies properties they want and makes problems until owners sell cheap. Marcus processed this. Any connection to Sarajevo? A pause. Not directly, but Kane was agency adjacent back then, worked with some of the same handlers. The pieces were starting to fit together. What's his interest in Riverdale? Blackwater's building some luxury complex. The Crossroads sits on a key parcel they need. Most other owners have sold already. Vulnerabilities? Jackson chuckled. Still thinking like an operator, I see. Kane's careful, heavily guarded, but he has a weekly card game at his penthouse downtown. Thursday nights. Tonight. Send me the details. Marcus? Jackson's voice turned serious. Kane's not some street thug. He's got training resources and no moral compass. If you're planning what I think you're planning, I'm not, Marcus interrupted. Just information gathering. Right. Jackson clearly didn't believe him. Well, if your information gathering requires backup, I still remember how to handle myself. The offer surprised Marcus. After Sarajevo, he'd cut ties with everyone from his past life. I'll keep that in mind. Returning inside, he found Tony wiping down the bar, his movements betraying his anxiety. Everything okay? The older man asked. Fine. Marcus paused. If the Vipers return tonight, don't resist. Let them posture make their threats. Just get them out as quickly as possible. Tony frowned. And where will you be during this hypothetical visit? Following up on a lead. Marcus met Tony's eyes. Trust me. The day passed slowly. Marcus went through the motions of his normal routine, checking supplies, testing the sound system, clearing space in the storage room. But his mind was elsewhere, preparing for the night ahead. At 6 o'clock, he told Tony he needed to leave early for a personal matter. The older man didn't question him, simply nodded with knowing eyes. Be careful, was all he said. Marcus returned to his apartment, unlocked the hidden compartment, and this time removed the contents. The familiar weight of the tactical gear centered him, focusing his mind. He wasn't planning an assault, not yet. This was reconnaissance only. But in his experience, reconnaissance often turned into something else entirely. He dressed in nondescript dark clothing, concealed the Glock in a shoulder holster, and secured the knife at his ankle. Multiple surveillance devices went into a small backpack. The ghost was re-emerging, methodical and emotionless. As darkness fell, Marcus made his way to the address Jackson had provided, a luxury high-rise in downtown Riverdale. Security was visible, but not excessive. 2 guards in the lobby guard access to the elevators, likely more security on Kane's floor. Finding a vantage point in the parking garage across the street, Marcus set up surveillance equipment and settled in to wait. His body remembered this stillness, this patience. Time ceased to have meaning as he observed the building's patterns, noting guard rotations, identifying vulnerabilities. At 10:37 p.m., his phone vibrated. Tony's name flashed on the screen. They're here, the old man said without preamble. At least 10 of them. Derek says they're not leaving until I sign their papers. Marcus's jaw tightened. Stall them. I'm on my way. Abandoning his surveillance position, he moved quickly but carefully toward his motorcycle parked 2 blocks away. The Crossroads was 15 minutes away in normal traffic. He could make it in 8. As he sped through the night, a cold anger built within him. The Vipers had shown their hand too early, too aggressively. It was a tactical error Marcus intended to exploit. The ghost was fully awake now, and someone was about to discover why that name had once struck fear into the hearts of America's enemies. The parking lot of the Crossroads came into view, filled with motorcycles and 2 black SUVs. Through the windows, Marcus could see a crowd gathered inside. Tony stood behind the bar, hands raised in a placating gesture. Several vipers surrounded him, while others had corralled the few customers against the wall. No sign of Lily. Thank God. Marcus parked his motorcycle in the shadows behind the building and retrieved his phone. The surveillance cameras he'd installed showed him the entire interior of the bar. He counted 12 vipers, all armed, mostly handguns, a few knives visible. Derek stood in front of Tony, waving what appeared to be ownership transfer documents. No Victor Kane. Interesting. Marcus considered his options. Direct confrontation was risky. Too many variables, too many potential casualties. But allowing the vipers to intimidate Tony into selling was unacceptable. He needed to change the equation. Circling to the rear entrance, Marcus used his key to silently enter the storage room. From there, he could hear Derek's voice, loud and threatening. "You've got 5 minutes to sign, old man. Then we start breaking things, starting with your fingers." Tony's reply was calm but defiant. "This bar isn't for sale. Not to you, not to Kane, not to anyone." A crash of breaking glass followed someone smashing bottles behind the bar. "That's expensive inventory," Derek taunted. "How much more can you afford to lose?" Marcus moved silently through the darkness of the storage room toward the bar area. Through a small window in the door, he could see the back of Derek's head, less than 10 feet away. The other vipers were scattered throughout the room, attention focused on Tony. None of them had noticed the door to the storage room opening a crack. Marcus drew the Glock, considering and discarding the option of simply shooting Derek from his position. Too final, too many witnesses, too many complications would follow. Instead, he reached into his pocket and removed a small cylindrical object, a flashbang grenade, non-lethal but disorienting. Military issue, technically illegal for civilian possession. One of many rules the Ghost had never bothered to follow. His thumb found the pin as he pushed the door open another inch. "Last chance, Tony," Derek was saying. "Sign now or—" Marcus pulled the pin and rolled the grenade into the center of the room. "Down!" he shouted to Tony, an instant before the device detonated with a blinding flash and deafening bang. Chaos erupted. The vipers, temporarily blinded and disoriented, stumbled and shouted in confusion. Marcus moved through the doorway, targeting Derek first. A precise strike to the base of the skull sent the man crumpling to the floor unconscious before he hit the ground. 2 more vipers fell in quick succession, victims of Marcus's silent, efficient attacks. He moved like a shadow through the confusion, exploiting the temporary advantage the flashbang had provided. But the effect was already wearing off. One of the vipers spotted him raising a pistol. There, behind the bar. Marcus dropped to the floor as bullets shattered bottles above his head. Rolling to the side, he came up with his Glock raised, firing twice. The first shot struck the gunman in the shoulder, spinning him around. The second hit his hand, sending the weapon clattering to the floor. "Police, freeze!" Sheriff Collins's voice cut through the chaos. He stood in the doorway, service weapon drawn, 2 deputies flanking him. The remaining vipers hesitated, caught between fight and flight. Marcus used their indecision to fade back into the shadows of the storage room, slipping out the rear exit before Collins could spot him. From the darkness outside, he watched through the windows as the sheriff took control of the situation. The wounded vipers were receiving first aid. Derek, regaining consciousness, was being handcuffed. Tony appeared shaken but unharmed, giving a statement to one of the deputies. Marcus's phone vibrated again. A text from Jackson. "Kane just left his penthouse. Heading your way with security. ETA 15 minutes. The situation had escalated beyond a simple intimidation attempt. Victor Kane was coming personally, which meant he considered the crossroads important enough to handle himself. Marcus melted into the shadows as police cars and an ambulance arrived. This confrontation was only the beginning. Kane would retaliate harder and with less restraint. And when he did, the ghost would be waiting. But first, Marcus needed to ensure Lily's safety. If Kane connected her to tonight's events, she would become a target. And that was something Marcus could not allow. The ghost had returned to Riverdale, and soon Victor Kane would learn why that name had once made hardened killers tremble. Dawn broke over Riverdale with the muted colors of a watercolor painting, soft pinks and oranges, bleeding into the gray urban landscape. Marcus Reed stood motionless on the roof of his apartment building, watching the city awaken. He hadn't slept. The adrenaline from the previous night's confrontation still hummed through his veins, a familiar sensation he'd almost forgotten during 2 years of civilian life. His phone displayed the surveillance feed from Lily's apartment building. She was safe, unaware of the violence that had erupted at the crossroads hours earlier. Marcus intended to keep it that way. Sheriff Collins had detained 3 members of the Vipers, including Derek Matheson. The others had scattered when the police arrived, but not before Marcus had placed a tracker on one of their motorcycles. The small device was now transmitting from a warehouse in the industrial district, likely their headquarters. His phone vibrated with an incoming call from Tony. "Collins just left," the older man said without preamble. "Place is a mess, but we're insured." A pause. "Want to tell me what happened last night?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "I received information about the Viper's plans. Arrived in time to create a distraction." "A distraction?" Tony's voice rose slightly. 3 men in the hospital, 1 with a bullet wound, and you call that a distraction?" "They're alive," Marcus replied flatly. "It was an option." The implication hung in the silence between them. "Jesus, Marcus," Tony finally whispered. "Who are you?" It was a question Marcus had asked himself many times over the years. The answer changed depending on the mission, the cover identity, the objective. But beneath all the layers, one truth remained constant. He was a weapon forged in combat and honed through countless operations. A ghost given purpose through violence. "Someone trying to help," he answered simply. Tony sighed heavily. "Collins is looking for you. Says he has questions about the armed individual witnesses saw during the incident." "I'll be there in 30 minutes. Before leaving, Marcus made one more call to Lily. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Marcus, it's not even 7 yet. Sorry to wake you. I need you to stay at your apartment today. Don't go to class. Don't go out." "What?" She was fully awake now. "Why, what's happened?" "There was an incident at the crossroads last night. The Vipers. Tony's fine, but until things settle down, I need you somewhere safe." "My God," she whispered. "Was anyone hurt?" "Nothing serious." The lie came easily. "Promise me you'll stay home today." "I promise." A pause. "Marcus, are you okay?" The question caught him off guard. In his world, okay had never been the standard. Operational, functional, effective. These were the metrics that mattered. "I'm fine," he said automatically. "Lock your door. I'll check in later." The crossroads looked like a war zone when Marcus arrived. Broken glass littered the floor. Bullet holes pockmarked the walls. The acrid smell of gunpowder still hung in the air, mingling with spilled liquor and fear. Tony was sweeping up glass behind the bar, his movements mechanical, stunned. He looked up as Marcus entered, relief washing over his features. "Thank God," he muttered. "I wasn't sure you'd actually come back." Marcus surveyed the damage. "I told you I would." "Yeah, well, After what I saw last night, Tony shook his head. You moved like something out of a movie. 3 armed men down before they knew what hit them. 4, Marcus corrected absently, still cataloging the destruction. The flashbang had scorched the floor. Bullet holes clustered near the storage room door where he'd been standing. Another group marked the wall behind the bar where Tony had been. His jaw tightened. They'd fired indiscriminately, not caring who got caught in the crossfire. Collins is in the office, Tony said, nodding toward the back. Been waiting almost an hour. Marcus found the sheriff seated behind Tony's cluttered desk, expression unreadable as he looked up from his notepad. Mr. Reed, he said formally. I was beginning to think you weren't coming. Marcus remained standing, positioned where he could see both Collins and the door. I'm here now. Mind telling me where you were when all hell broke loose last night? Here, Marcus answered truthfully. I arrived through the back entrance after receiving a call from Tony about trouble. Collins's eyes narrowed. Multiple witnesses described a man matching your description engaging the suspects with what appeared to be military combat techniques. One suspect was shot. Self-defense, Marcus said. They fired first. With a gun you shouldn't have had, Collins countered. No concealed carry permit is registered to you in this state. Marcus said nothing. Legal technicalities meant little to a man who had operated beyond the law for most of his adult life. Collins studied him for a long moment. You know, I ran your background check when Tony hired you. Former Army Special Forces, honorable discharge. Impressive service record. He leaned forward. But there's a 2-year gap after your discharge and before you showed up in Riverdale. Care to fill that in? Private security consulting, Marcus replied with the cover story he'd established years ago. Overseas. Uh-huh. Collins clearly didn't believe him. Look, Reed, I don't know what your game is, but I know a professional when I see one. The way you handled those men last night wasn't standard bouncer training. Marcus remained silent, expression neutral. Collins sighed. Here's the situation. 3 members of a known criminal organization assaulted the owner of this establishment. You intervened perhaps with excessive force, but ultimately in defense of Tony and his customers. As far as the official report goes, you were legally defending yourself and others from an imminent threat. Marcus blinked, genuinely surprised. You're not pressing charges. No, Collins confirmed. But I need something from you in return. Information. What do you know about Victor Kane and why he's so interested in the crossroads? It was a reasonable question. Collins was trying to protect his town, and Marcus respected that. Kane works for Blackwater Development, he explained. They're building luxury condos in Riverdale. The crossroads sits on a parcel they need to complete the project. That much I figured out, Collins said impatiently. What I don't understand is why they're using such aggressive tactics for one small bar. Something doesn't add up. Marcus had been wondering the same thing. The level of resources Kane was committing to acquiring the crossroads seemed disproportionate to its actual value. I'm working on finding out, he admitted. Collins studied him thoughtfully. You've got resources, contacts, more than a typical bar bouncer should have. It wasn't a question, so Marcus didn't answer. Fine, keep your secrets, Collins said, standing. But understand this, I'm responsible for law and order in Riverdale. If you're planning something that threatens, that we're going to have problems. My only concern is protecting Tony and his bar, Marcus replied. And my sister. Something in his tone must have convinced Collins, because the sheriff's expression softened slightly. Then we want the same thing. He handed Marcus a business card. My personal number. Call if you learn anything about Kane's plans, or if you need backup. After Collins left, Marcus found Tony sitting at the bar, staring at the destruction around him. Can't open today, the older man said. Maybe not tomorrow either. Marcus nodded. Take the time to clean up properly. I'll help. Collins isn't charging you. No. Tony looked up, his eyes tired but determined. He's a good man, trying to do right by this town. He paused. Are you a good man, I mean? The question struck deeper than Tony could know. Marcus had spent years following orders, completing missions, all in service to his country. But good, that judgment belonged to history, to God, perhaps certainly not to him. I try to be, he finally answered. Tony seemed to accept this. Kane called while you were with Collins. Says he wants to meet, just him and me, to discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement. Marcus frowned. When? Tonight? Here. Tony's expression hardened. I'm going to hear what he has to say. It's a trap. Probably. Tony shrugged. But what choice do I have? He'll keep coming until I either sell or... He gestured at the damaged bar. Marcus considered their options. A meeting with Kane could provide valuable intelligence, a glimpse into the man's motivations and plans. But it also carried significant risk. I'll be here, he decided. Out of sight, but close. Tony nodded gratefully. Thank you. He hesitated. Marcus, there's something else you should know. Something I haven't told anyone. He reached beneath the bar and removed a weathered manila envelope. The real reason I can't sell the Crossroads. Inside the envelope, Marcus found property deeds, old photographs, and newspaper clippings. As he pieced together the story they told, his expression grew increasingly grim. The land under this building, Tony explained, it's not just valuable real estate. 30 years ago, before I bought it, something happened here. Something Blackwater Development doesn't want made public. Marcus studied a yellowed newspaper article from 1992. The headline read, Industrial Waste Scandal, Local Company Accused of Illegal Dumping. Blackwater, he asked. Tony nodded. They operated under a different name back then, Riverside Chemical Processing. Same owners, though. They were manufacturing industrial solvents and dumping the waste illegally right where this building now stands. Environmental contamination, Marcus murmured, scanning the documents. Carcinogens in the groundwater. They paid off officials, buried the evidence, and eventually the story died, Tony continued. Years later, I bought the property not knowing its history. It was only when my wife got sick cancer that I started investigating. The pieces were falling into place. That's why they want this land so badly. Their new development would require extensive excavation, which might expose the contaminated soil. Exactly. Tony's eyes reflected decades of pain. Maria died 15 years ago. Her last wish was that I preserve this place, keep the truth from being buried again. His voice hardened. That's why I'll never sell to Blackwater. Not for any price. Marcus understood now. This wasn't just about a neighborhood bar. It was about justice long delayed, about a deathbed promise, about the kind of principles that defined a man's life. Kane won't stop, he warned. Not with this much at stake. I know. Tony's expression was resolute. That's why I'm grateful you're here, though I'm still not entirely sure who you really are. Marcus made a decision then. Tony deserved some measure of truth. I was special forces like my background check shows, but after that, I worked for a division of the government that doesn't officially exist. We handled problems that couldn't be solved through diplomatic or conventional military channels. An assassin, Tony said quietly. Among other things, Marcus admitted, I left after a mission went wrong, tried to build a normal life. He looked around the damaged bar. Not doing a great job of it so far. Tony absorbed this information without visible shock. And Lily? Does she know? No. Marcus's tone left no room for discussion. And she can't. Ever. Your secret is safe with me. Tony placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, a gesture of trust that felt foreign but not unwelcome. Now, let's clean this place up before Kane arrives. I want him to see that it takes more than a few thugs to break the crossroads. They spent the day sweeping up glass, patching bullet holes, and restoring order to the bar. By late afternoon, most of the damage had been concealed or repaired. The place wouldn't win any beauty contests, but it was functional and, more importantly, it showed resilience. Marcus's phone chimed with a text from Jackson. Intel on Kane. Previous employment with private military contractors after his discharge. Specialized in acquisition of valuable assets in conflict zones. Reputation for extreme measures. Currently employs at least 20 former operators with similar backgrounds. Be careful. The message confirmed what Marcus already suspected. Kane wasn't just a corporate thug, he was a professional with training and resources similar to Marcus's own. The confrontation ahead would require more than brute force. As evening approached, Marcus checked the surveillance feeds from Lily's apartment. No unusual activity. She had kept her promise to stay inside, texting him periodically for updates. Her last message asked when she could visit the crossroads again. He hadn't responded. Tony closed the main entrance, leaving only the rear door accessible for Kane's arrival. Marcus positioned himself in the storage room, where he could observe the meeting through the surveillance system while remaining hidden. At precisely 9 o'clock, a black Escalade pulled into the alley behind the crossroads. Two men in suits emerged first, scanning the area with professional vigilance. They checked the rear entrance before one spoke into a wrist microphone. Only then did Victor Kane step out of the vehicle. Marcus's first glimpse of his adversary was revealing. Kane was tall, perhaps 6'2", with the muscular build of someone who maintained rigorous military fitness despite being in his late 40s. His silver hair was cut short, his posture impeccable. He moved with the controlled awareness of a predator, eyes constantly assessing his surroundings. Marcus recognized the type immediately. Kane was agency-trained, likely Black Ops, the kind of operator who survived by anticipating threats before they materialized. A worthy opponent. Kane entered the crossroads alone, leaving his security team in the alley. Tony waited behind the bar, his expression guarded as he watched the man approach. "Mr. Marino," Kane greeted him, voice smooth and cultured. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. May I—" He gestured toward a bar stool. Tony nodded stiffly. Kane sat, placing his hands flat on the bar, a deliberate gesture to show he was unarmed. "I apologize for the unfortunate events of last night," Kane began. "Derek sometimes exercises excessive enthusiasm in his duties. He's been reprimanded accordingly." "3 of your men are in the hospital," Tony replied. "One with a gunshot wound. That's more than unfortunate." Kane smiled thinly. "Yes, your security personnel is quite effective. Ex-military, I presume." Tony didn't respond to the probe. "You wanted to talk business." "Talk? Direct. I appreciate that." Kane glanced around the bar. "This establishment has significant sentimental value to you." "I understand that now. My previous offers failed to account for emotional attachment."